No, I'm not a writer.
Okay.
Something is about to break.
Welcome to episode 001 of About to Break, featuring Micah Hanson. Micah grew up as a child actor here in Los Angeles. You'll hear a little bit about his experience growing up, going on casting calls, doing commercial work, and then finding out that that's not really what he wanted to do with his life. He now spends his days as an incredible illustrator and artist. He designed the logo for this podcast, and you can find out more about his work at micahhanson.com. Also, be sure to check out abouttobreakpodcast.com for live show dates and more. You can also get to our Patreon site, which is a little way for you to help sponsor what we've got going on here at the podcast. You can go on there, you can kick in a little dough, and we'll even send you some goodies as a thank you for participating. So check it all out at abouttobreakpodcast.com. Until then, sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with one of my best buddies in the entire world, Micah Hanson.
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
And someday, you're gonna be a big star.
They're gonna put me in the movies. They're gonna make a big star out of me. We'll make a film about a man that's sad and lonely. And all I gotta do is act naturally. Well, I'll bet you.
All right, guys, welcome to About to Break. This week I've got my really good buddy. I shouldn't say my really good buddy, because that's what I say when someone's kind of my buddy. I say they're my really good buddy. Micah is hands down one of the best friends I've ever had. He and his wife literally live. How far do you guys live away, man? It's like
just a hop, skip, and a jump.
It
right?
literally is a hop, skip, and a jump.
Yeah.
It's like 3 blocks.
Yeah.
3 blocks away. So we walk to each other's house all the time. In fact, tonight, here's how this podcast recording started is we've been talking about doing this forever. And then tonight, we're just hanging out. The families were having dinner. And I said, we got to stop talking. Drop the kids off at home. When they go to bed, come back. And we'll record. So that's what we're doing. We're sitting at my kitchen table, and we're going to try to recreate the magic that was happening when we were talking earlier. So Micah, this podcast is really about artists and people who have a creative bent and just want to do that creative bent for a living. And Micah is one of the most creative guys I've ever met. I know we'll get into your art and all that you're doing now, but you started off acting.
Yeah.
You want to take us back to your childhood acting?
Sure,
and
yeah.
How did that start? When did you get into that?
Gosh, I don't know. I grew up, from a very young age, like a lot of kids doing the musicals and the school plays and stuff. And, which I think is where it kind of stops for most kids. But my mom thought I had something, and, of course, all our church members thought I had, you know how it goes. And, so she enrolled me in acting classes. So, gosh,
how old were you when this was going on?
I think when I started taking professional acting classes out in Studio City, I think I was either in 7th or 8th grade.
Wow.
So and so I would do that twice a week. I'd get out of school, and then we would drive all the way out to Studio City. I'd take classes. I'd be there till 10 at night. Drive home.
Doing homework in the car, like trying to finish up.
Yeah, and then after that, it wasn't too long after I was taking those classes that I started auditioning, and so most of my junior high school years, I was getting out of school, doing as much homework as I could, and then we would get, a text, at the time it wasn't even a text. It was,
you get the pager.
The pager,
yeah.
Yes.
I remember I had a pager in freshman year, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Right. Yes.
It was so not.
Not when you look back, no, because, oh my gosh, we would get a page, and it would be we'd have to call him back. I'd hear that I had some kind of an audition.
Yeah, and it was like a huge hassle because when you don't have a phone, it's not like someone leaves you a message so you take that same device and call them. It's like, I've now got to go find a payphone somewhere.
Yes, and this is things like our kids will never understand this.
No.
But, we would be out, I'd be driving to some audition in Hollywood. This is, of course, junior high school. At this time, I can't even drive yet. My mom's driving me around.
Yeah.
Later on, I was the one driving, but this was my entire evenings. And we'd be out there going to an audition. We'd get a page. You'd have to stop somewhere. And, of course, anybody who lives in L.A. knows, you can't find parking anywhere. It's horrible.
Right.
And so you'd have to find a place to park. You would always carry quarters around in your car with you because you knew you were going to have quarters. Exactly. So you'd park and then you'd look for a payphone, and then we had calling cards.
Yes.
Right? Because you've got to be able to call from any payphone anywhere. And so you'd call back and it was your agent, and then they'd say, "Oh, you got another audition today." And so, then you'd have to drive somewhere where you could receive a fax.
Yeah.
So there, who knows, maybe...
Meanwhile, kids your age are, building jumps for the bicycle and, playing flag football in the front yard.
Playing Legos,
yeah.
and I'm and I'm looking through a Thomas Brothers map guide in our car,
Thomas guide.
trying to figure out where our next stop is. Yeah, it was... Not a normal childhood.
But did you enjoy it? You had a passion for acting, did you? Or looking back on it?
Yes and no. I think, honestly, I loved a lot of acting. I didn't love the audition process. I hated it. For anybody that knows me, I've always been shy. I'm sort of an introvert. So I loved to act, but I hated the process of trying to sell myself.
Yeah.
And I think I still do to this day,
Oh, yeah.
And I also think part of it, too, is, especially at that age, this feeling that I had something I was good at, and you don't want to let other people down when they're like, "You're good at this."
Right.
So I think that carried me for a long, long time.
Wow.
I acted all the way through. I went to college for acting. I went to USC. I was part of a theater program there, BFA program. I had auditioned. Was one of 18 people that they accept every year, accepted into this, really focused program. And it was my senior year when I really started to get burnt out on acting, and kind of started to question why I was doing it, why I had done it all along.
And at this time, you had done some commercial work and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So you're getting mailbox money and
yeah,
which is not bad,
which actually helped pay for quite a bit of my college education.
Yeah.
Actually, but yeah, I had acted for so long and started to kind of hit a point where I was like, why am I doing this? I felt sort of disillusioned with the whole thing. And then, are we doing my whole life story?
Sure, man.
Right?
There's no agenda here. It's just let's talk about life.
Yeah.
We'll eventually.
It all connects. It really does. And I think that's one of my biggest hopes is that years from now I'll look back and the time we're at now will make sense to me. Too,
right. For those of you, we'll continue the conversation in a moment, but to add some context, Micah, this podcast, before it ever was even a thought, this was our regular conversation. Micah and I are both artists. We're both creative guys.
Yeah.
We both are crazy passionate about the work that we do and what we want to do. And we both, on the regular, have to talk each other off the ledge because...
Right? Yes.
So we're just giving you a little intro into who Micah is, and then we'll get into the current mental state of the two of us. So you decided kind of midway through college, you're feeling like, I don't know if this is what I want to do anymore. And it's your major.
Yeah, it's
your
major.
Focus. You're going to the school for that.
Well, senior year, I remember being in the middle of a scene in class, and I stopped in the middle of the scene. I wasn't in the headspace. It wasn't working for me. And the teacher goes, "What's wrong?" And I said, I don't know why I'm doing this anymore.
Wow, in class?
In class.
Really?
In front of all,
now, had you already
and these are all people I've gone through all 4 years with,
right.
Yeah.
And that's all life is about doing this and getting it done and getting it.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
And so had you already been thinking this way? Had you been processing this? Or was that like the first moment
I think
this thought popped in your head and it just came out your mouth?
I think I had sort of been processing it subconsciously, but that was like a moment, yeah. And the teacher looked at me and she said, "Well, then why don't you quit?" And I said, because I'm in my senior year and I spent a lot of money on this education and I can't just walk away now.
Yeah.
And she didn't really like that answer, and that's fine, you know. But yeah, and everything after that kind of really changed for me. And I finished out the rest of the year because I had put in 3.5 years in an expensive college education for a theater degree.
Yeah.
And I needed to at least get my degree. But after that, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I ended up getting just a regular job. I worked at a Barnes and Noble selling books, and I really didn't know what to do. I felt this pressure even at that point that I should still get out and audition because this is what I spent my whole life doing. I literally spent, I would say, 5 to 7 years struggling with wanting to walk away, but feeling like this is all I know how to do. This is my identity. This is.
Well, and so much of your life is wrapped up in going to auditions and...
Well, your life, but then also not just what you do, but then how people know you as, and like...
Because we're defined by what we do.
Yeah.
You are what you do.
Yeah.
It's Micah the actor.
Right, yeah.
Wow.
And then who are you at that point? And so, yeah, I really... it was a long journey. Through all of that, I met my now wife, Sabrina, and, so we were dating, and then we ended up getting engaged. We moved out to Florida for about a half a year. I worked there as a CAD drafter, and then we moved to Tennessee, and I worked in tile for a year. And over the course of that whole time away from, where I grew up, which was here in California, I sort of rediscovered art. And I say rediscovered because as a kid, I loved art. I loved comics. I loved line drawings. And so I started to get into it, but not really thinking of it in terms of a career for me.
When you say you started to get into it, was that as a hobby?
As a hobby,
like just in free time, you're doodling, or you're looking at comics. What do you
doodling, looking at comics, looking at other art, kind of getting exposed to what was out there, but never really thinking I could do this because in my mind, there's talent, right? And so you're either born talented or you're not. And I'd never really thought of something like drawing as something you could learn, like a skill you could learn, or as creativity as being something that you could develop.
Right.
To me, it was just like you either have it or you don't, and I didn't really understand how that worked.
And you're how old at this time? You guys are just recently married and moved out of state.
Mm-hmm. So I was probably, I want to say, I don't know, it's probably... What am I now? 37. So I was probably 26, 27.
So 26, 27 years old. Mm-hmm. You've spent your entire life acting. Now, and what's weird is, as strange and weird, and we could talk all day about how weird auditions are. Once you get in the routine of it, it's weird to not do it.
Yeah.
And now you're laying tile.
Right.
And you're living in a different state, and you're a married man.
Yes, yeah.
And all of a sudden, at 26 years old, you're trying to figure out, what do I really like?
Uh-huh, yeah.
And yet you still got this creative bent and passion, but you don't really know. You don't have a vessel or a vehicle to...
Yeah. Talk about feeling lost, and then the kind of the weird feeling of discovering something you really like, but going, well, that can't be for me. I'm not gifted at that.
Had you tried, like you said when you were a kid you liked art, had you tried?
Oh, I doodled all the time when I was a kid, but there are kid doodles, and the strange thing, I mean, I've learned this now about what people call talent, because I really don't believe talent is a real word. I just don't.
What do you mean by that?
Okay, so I do believe some people are born with certain giftings beyond normal people, sure. Okay, that does exist, but in general, when someone says, oh, this person is talented, what they don't understand is that person spent years and years and years perfecting a craft, And so a lot of times the word talent is really just something that someone has done so much that they've learned what not to do, what to do.
Right.
They've learned, a routine. They understand more than the normal person about a certain thing, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And so I thought, because I would look at my, little kid doodles that I still had, in a dusty box somewhere and go, this looks terrible. This doesn't look anything like these amazing artists I look at. Well, I can't do this. But I didn't understand that it's like anything else. You have to practice it. You have to, work hard at it.
And that if you did put the time in, your abilities would increase, and your comfort or your confidence would increase along with that. Yeah.
Sure. And there's no denying that had I been on this journey earlier in life, I'd probably be further in some ways than I am now. I mean, I think a lot of it too has to do with what you're exposed to growing up. It's certainly easier to be better at something or amazing at something when you grew up doing it your whole life, or when you had parents that did that thing. All those things really influence, what you understand and know well when you get older.
Yeah.
But I don't think that means that you can't pick something up later. And, it was somewhere in that time of being, living out of California that I kind of thought, gosh, I want to give this a try. And after we moved back to California, it was within that first year that I started taking classes for drawing. And I honestly, I really don't know what made me decide to do it, because it sounds kind of nuts, right? Like, I remember saying to Sabrina one day,
this is like the age you're supposed to be settling down, and
right.
you're already in the 30-year job you're gonna do.
Gosh, yeah.
Okay, I want to come back to your art classes. So we'll catch back up to where you talked about art.
Yeah.
And when you first decided to take classes, because I want to get that experience as an adult.
Yeah.
Starting something new.
Okay.
But what I'm amazed by is you didn't stop acting because you weren't good at it.
Yeah.
You didn't stop acting because you weren't trained and you weren't prepared and you didn't know how to do an audition.
Right.
How is that when you go, oh my goodness, I am good at this thing, but this is not the thing I want to do? Walk me through that.
I don't know. It's like when you tear a sticker off of a wall that's been stuck there a long time and part of it stays. I don't know how else to describe it. It's like you're tearing a piece of yourself off. I mean, certainly all those experiences, all those things I know, those inform my decisions as an artist. Those still are usable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still a great experience and things that I know, but to try to separate my identity from that was that's why it took me 5 or 6 years to kind of let that go.
Yeah. Well, and as you were saying when you were in class and talking to your professor and saying, I got to get this degree, it'd be stupid not to.
Yeah.
I've spent all this time, I'm trained in this.
Yeah.
And yet then being able to say, even though I'm doing this, even though I'm booking work,
yeah,
I'm going to walk away from it because it's not my thing.
Yeah.
How weird was that? Because there's that part of you, and we talk about this constantly, when we don't have microphones in front of us,
right.
About that thing, that like nagging voice that says, just get a normal job.
Yeah.
Just go do something.
Yeah.
And for you, your normal job could have been acting.
Right.
You could have been a commercial actor and been very successful, and you were already doing it. And yet you said no to that because it wasn't.
Yeah.
What was that about?
You want to talk about guilt, right? I mean, guilt on so many levels. Guilt because of the amount of money that... I paid for part of my tuition with the money I made from acting, but my parents sacrificed a lot of money for that education. And not just the college, but all my life, my mom taking me out, gas money, time, taking me out to those auditions. I mean... there's that guilt, and then being married, and then now, for those listening, I have 4 children, which is why I am about to break,
I told Micah earlier tonight, I said, as we're sitting in our living room, I looked at him, I said, About to Break should be the name of your sitcom about your life.
Yes.
Micah has this look.
And
I wish you could see the look, but it's a look that when you think, this can't get any more insane, and then someone turns the knob to 11. If the look had a sound, it would be this. It's amazing look that you can only accomplish when you are severely outnumbered by your children.
Yes. Yeah. And we laugh and it's funny, but we're crying inside too, right? I mean, it's one of those laughter tears.
And you have very small children as well.
Yes. My oldest is 8. My youngest is 7 months. And so, what I was saying with the guilt thing is not just, from the past, but also the present in terms of, these questions of, well, had I just decided to say, who cares what I want to do? I've got a family.
Right.
Who cares, what fulfills me?
Right.
I got to feed my kids.
And be around for your kids.
Yeah.
Because, this is another thing we battle with is anything you do in the arts, whether it's photography, filmmaking, art, dance, whatever it is, these are not 9-to-5 jobs.
No.
These are not, you clock in and you clock out and you go home and you forget about it till the next day.
Right.
This is something that is always, it's almost like a film that's always running in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
Of thoughts or ideas or things you're looking forward to.
Yes.
And every now and then you try to grab one of those things.
Yeah.
And hope it sticks around long enough.
Right. Yeah. I've worked many jobs and all normal, 9-to-5 on some level jobs. And every time I'm in a job longer than about 6 months, I hit that point where the job becomes mundane to me. It's not a challenge. It's not challenging me creatively. It's there's nothing for me to solve or anything for me to fix. And I start to go a little bit nuts doing the same thing. And I can't tell you how many hours of my life I have spent asking myself, why do I need to do this? Why can't I just accept that, hey, you got to grow up and work a job?
Right.
Why can't I just grow up and do this, All that guilt that goes along with it, I think, too.
And yet there's something in the midst of all it, because you're not an unreasonable guy.
No.
We're responsible.
Hopefully not. I think I've lost my mind a little bit.
Oh, yeah, but
that's been a long time coming.
But of all the people I know, I wouldn't describe you as selfish or self-seeking, and yet there is that thing that as an artist, like my buddy Christian, who will be on the podcast, he calls it the curse. Mm-hmm. The way he describes it is he's a musician, he's a drummer, and he's like, if someone said, I'll pay you $100,000 to sit at this desk for 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, and do something you don't like, or I'm going to pay you $30,000 to be a drummer. He's going to take the gig at $30,000 to be a drummer.
Right.
Because for him, he has to do music.
Yeah.
I don't know if you would describe it like he does as a curse, but there is that thing that for whatever reason, it's pushing you toward this other thing.
Well, it's like, and I don't want to make it sound like more than it is, but it's like having a purpose, right? It's like having, I don't want to use the word calling, but it's like having something to wake up to live for. And I don't want to oversimplify it, because I'm sure, there's accountants out there who love what they do, and that's what they want to do.
Right.
Not to single out accountants, but it's just something that I don't want to do, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Oh, yeah.
And so, I think that there's something about living for something that at the end of the day you feel fulfilled doing versus something that just feels like it sucks your soul out a little bit every day.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The money that you might get from a that kind of a job isn't worth what you give up, I think. But it's a struggle, obviously.
The last office job that I had that you're very well aware of. We don't have to get into what the location was.
Sure. Yeah.
I could have stayed there forever.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that they were unhappy with me.
Right.
It was just that I was not about what that place was about.
Right.
And I remember telling Katie the day that I was going to resign, I was supposed to go into the office, and I was walking out the door, and I just felt like every day that I go to this place, I feel less like myself.
Yeah.
It's almost like I've got there's all the bits of you that are you, and they're uniquely you. Yeah. And this sounds like such a privileged conversation.
I know.
We're not downplaying anybody who has an office job.
No.
Like some people, that's their calling and their gifting for management and administrative work, and we need those people. And we absolutely
and to turn ideas into big, money making. That's people who do that. That's amazing.
Yeah,
to me.
Somebody doing art that has those gifting would feel the way you do trying to go into the office when that's not your gifting.
Yeah.
So all that to say, I felt like there's all these little pieces that make up my personality or my, just who I am as an individual. And it was almost like every day I went in, I had to give them some of that, and I'd come home without it.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've known each other for years, and Sabrina has even said, your wife has said, you were not yourself the last couple years you were at that place,
and we had many conversations when we would see you, and just felt like, gosh, we want the old Taylor back. We just feel like he's...
And it's not about not working hard. It's not about trying to get a gig, because everything we are wanting to do, everything you want to do, I mean, I've seen... by the way, guys, Micah is an amazing artist. We're going to get into him taking art classes. I'm going to blow the punchline. He's an incredible artist. If you've looked at the logo for this podcast, he drew that, he illustrated it, he created it. Amazing artist. So it's not about working hard, because this stuff takes hours and hours and hours of work.
In fact, I got to say that's one of the harder things for me is that, a 9-to-5 job, it's hard work, but that's easy for me because I know what the hours are. I know, but when you're doing something creative, right. I mean, creativity can take so much time to, good design takes so much time. And that's one of those things where there's no rule book or anything telling you, oh, this should take this much time. It's, it's you're putting a piece of your soul into it, And
there is a certain level of investment emotionally that goes into art.
Yes.
Now, when you're a creative person and you're putting work out there, especially for you as an artist, and then you're presenting that to a possible client or someone who's gonna monetize your art, right? Do you wrestle with this whole thing of it's almost like, because so much, like you mentioned, so much of yourself goes into it.
Yeah.
When they don't like it, or maybe they want to go a different direction, there's this thing of like, they're rejecting me.
Yes, yeah. And also, but you don't understand how many hours I've spent thinking about this design decision I made.
And within 3 seconds they go, I don't like it.
Right, exactly. That's the struggle.
I want one with a pony on it.
And I got to say, that is why so many of the artists that I personally look up to and follow, who work in the studios, and that's their day job, they have to go home at night and do their own work. Because the work that they do during the day, yes, they put their soul into it, but it's not their work at the end of the day. It's the decisions are being made by someone else, and they have to let those things go. They're little deaths that they face all day long. And so the only place they have real creative control and freedom is when they go home and do their own personal stuff.
That's interesting. And you see a lot of guys who they're somewhat doing what they're passionate about. They're using their gift, but they're designing, those signs on the bench for the realtor,
right.
That guy.
Yes,
they're doing that all day.
Sure. Yeah.
And then at night they go home and make this amazing piece of art that goes on their Instagram and everybody loves. But they didn't get paid for that.
No.
At some point they will.
Someday they will.
Hope that someday,
yeah.
I have a friend he's a magician, and he does a lot of corporate magic as well, and I talk about that a bunch. But he is an incredible photographer, and he's done some photo shoots for me that I've loved his stuff. But he started doing photography because even though he's incredibly brilliant in the work that he does trade shows, and so everything he does is pitching someone else's idea, and so he can never really be creative and just come up with a piece that he feels like is going to inspire or connect, or because it all has to, at the end of the day, sell tires or vinyl windows or whatever is the purpose of his gig. So he kind of went the opposite direction and just found this whole other thing that he does. And so the thing he used to be passionate about is now the day job.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Still loves it, but...
Well, and I think that's an interesting lesson too, right? Because even when you're doing that thing that's supposed to be fulfilling, anytime money is involved with anything, it shifts from, maybe it doesn't have to, but it tends to shift from something that you're passionate about into something that you have to do, that is an obligation, that is part of...
How funny that's like, for everyone, that's the goal. I mean, so much of this podcast is talking about how do I make a living doing the thing that I love.
Right.
And yet you're saying, and I totally see that once you're getting paid for it, it becomes a gig.
And I'm sure there's an element of like you can choose to still look at it the same way, but I don't think you can completely change that dynamic, right? Whenever someone else is calling the shots because they're paying the money,
right,
it ceases to be just your personal enjoyment. You know, I came to sort of an agreement with myself recently. This is probably about a year ago, because for a number of years as I've been practicing and learning drawing, you know, the goal was to get a studio job, and that's still kind of what I'm working towards, so I do freelance stuff on the side, but I sort of came to this place of a little bit of peace about it, where it's like, you know, I know that when that does happen, it's going to be great, but it's going to be just that. It's going to be doing something for someone else. There's going to be deadlines. There's going to be, you know, things that someone's going to not like, and I've got to change it even though I disagree. And you know, even though you need to be professional about it, it hurts a little bit. And so I kind of started to allow myself to just enjoy where I was at in terms of my art, and saying, you know, it's okay if I'm not where I want to be right now.
Right.
Because I can still go home and do the work I want to do for myself.
Yeah.
Draw a picture that to me, like, I'm happy with, I enjoy. Because I'm going to have to do that anyways when, you know, when I'm finally got, you know, wherever it is I'm going to.
What a good encouragement. Just the whole thing of being present and being grateful for where you're at. Because I think so often we're so looking ahead to something else, and then you get that.
Yeah.
I mean, you see this in corporate America constantly. It's like, all right, I got to be a supervisor, and then you become a supervisor, and then you got to be a VP,
right.
And then after you're VP, you got to be, you know, like you're in charge of this regional VP or whatever it is.
Right.
And we're always thinking, someday I'm going to be happy, someday I'm going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And then what happens? We get to the end, and we're too old to enjoy anything, and our kids are grown up, and we've, you know, for us as artists, what is success? Is it being able to pay the bills, or is it being able to enjoy the moment that we're in?
Well, you know, in terms of creativity, there's never going to be an end to the growth unless you intentionally stop the growth, right? Unless you say, I'm done growing, I just don't want to grow anymore.
Yeah.
So I think every artist really has to come to a point where they become okay with the fact that they're not they're not the amazing artists that they maybe want to be, or they're not great at, I don't know, drawing hands as well as they want to, or there's always going to be something they need to get better at, and that's okay, because if you ran out of things to get better at, if you ran out of, you know, goals to pursue as an artist, how bored would you be, right?
Right.
I have to tell myself this, because I'm, you know, for those listening, I'm a perfectionist, and I'm a little bit of a control freak, and so for me it's really always been hard to enjoy the journey, because I'm always unhappy with where I'm at. I'm always looking ahead to where I want to be. But yeah, I really think you've got to learn to enjoy the fact that you're not amazing at every little thing you want to yet, because once you are, then what, you know?
It's just such a good reminder. I mean, on one hand, it sounds so elementary to say, like, oh, be happy where you're at.
Yeah.
We're constantly comparing ourselves to other people.
Oh, yeah.
We look at Facebook, and it's like, everybody's perfect.
Right.
They're all taking vacations. How are they affording to go do that?
Sure, yeah.
And they're all getting opportunities we're not getting.
Yeah.
You know, but if we've ever walked around and you see someone taking a selfie, and you see, you know that's going to come out filtered up and clean and looking awesome.
Sure.
But what you really see is them just sad, sitting there trying to get the picture that looks perfect.
Right, yeah.
As they are sitting by themselves in this awesome place that they should just be enjoying.
Right. Well, the dichotomy is that it's necessary to have some comparison, right? Like, how would you know what you want to aspire to as an artist if you don't have someone you're looking at that just makes you want to cry every time you see their work? Right? Every time you look at their stuff, you're just like, oh, man, I don't know if I'm ever going to get there. So it's necessary to have, like, something to look at, something to... But then I guess the balance is being able to look at that, use it as inspiration and motivation, and then go, okay, I'm just going to keep moving forward and still enjoy where I'm at, you know? Today, I'm oh my gosh, just so much better than I used to be, right? But I'm nowhere near where I want to be. But man, when I look at the stuff when I first started, so bad. so bad. And I know, like, in 10 years, I'm going to look at the stuff I'm doing now and be like, so bad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it's not bad.
But, right.
And it wasn't bad then.
No.
It's just where you were at.
Exactly.
As an artist, when people see your work, what do you want them to experience?
I want them to experience what I experience when I look at good art, which is wonder. Like, I don't know how else to explain it, but the reason I got into doing art is when I saw artists I like, it was like Christmas. I don't know why. I don't know why that's what, gets me excited, but it does when I see good design. And for those listening who don't know, what I'm into in my work, I'm into more animated, simplistic, cartoon type stuff that it has elements of real life in terms of form, volume, structure, but it's exaggerated a little bit. I mean, for whatever reason, that's what I love. I love looking at that kind of stuff. I love drawing that. And so when I see it, done well by an artist, I get super excited. I get excited by the loose lines. I always have as a kid. I remember absolutely loving the way that light and shadow to define volume. But then I love the way that shapes and proportions can be exaggerated and be really appealing when they're done right. I mean, this is all design, right? Yeah. But my focus in terms of design is towards, animated character design and illustration. I mean, that's what I love. I do, some graphic design on the side. I worked for 5 years as a digital animator and a compositor. But through that journey, like, I found that what really mattered to me was drawing and designing characters and yeah.
Talk to me about the wonder.
The wonder.
Yeah, I find it amazing because that's when I do magic shows, and when people ask me why do you like magic or what got you into it? Yeah. And I always say it's the wonder because, and I use the Christmas morning, which we haven't talked about this. I don't think we've talked about this. I've never heard you talk about it in regards to art. As an adult, there's very few Santa Claus moments. Yeah. I mean, we live in a world that's so oversaturated with information. Yeah. We are never before has there been a generation that just has instant access to anything with their phone. Yeah. And so we don't ever sit and ponder and look at the stars and think, what if? We don't ever wrestle with what else could there be because we're so busy. And when we do have a question, we immediately have to. I mean, now they've got, Alexa and Siri and all these things that you don't even have to, you just yell a name and they're going to tell you the answer. Sure, yeah. And yet that's what I love about a good card trick, as silly as it is and as unimportant as it is. It causes you to pause on life. It causes you to hit the pause button and go, I don't understand that, and maybe there's other things I don't understand. Like,
there's something very rich about it. Yeah. Very it can't be replicated on a little phone or by being on Twitter. It's I mean, I think that's why we sit down to some extent, and I know it's a little different, but it's why we watch stories so much. It's why, I mean, this is very important. It's just that, on some level, a lot of it is taken over by the fact that it's all driven by advertising and money and everything else. But somewhere in there is that thing, whether it's wonder or it's really some form of a depth of emotion, right? It's an experience. For me, like, I have certain artists that I follow that I love, and I have a Santa Claus moment looking at their work just about every day. Wow. And with my personal work, maybe I have a Santa Claus moment once every month or two, Yeah. But it's great when I have that feeling, And I don't mean that to sound arrogant, but that's kind of what you're going for, right? Like, when you can actually get that feeling from your own work, it means you're, like, getting somewhere, right? You're starting to do the work that matters to you. And even, if it's just cartoon characters, it still means something. It's design, it's beauty, in some way, to me anyways.
I think some of the frustration that we feel as artists is, one, when we feel great about something we've created, and it's not reciprocated or received by an audience. Yeah. And I think almost more, at least for me, what's more frustrating is when I create something and I don't feel it. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
We both are huge fans of, I don't want to speak for you, but of Bo Burnham. Yeah. And on Bo's special, Make Happy, available on Netflix. He has this line where he talks about them laughing at it, this kid on stage referring to himself.
Yeah.
And he says, laugh as he attempts to give you what he cannot give himself.
Right. Yes.
And I think how much of it is creating the work for other people and how much of it is just trying to... When I was a kid, I played guitar, and I still play guitar from time to time.
Yeah.
But I could always hear things in my head that I couldn't get my fingers to do.
Right. Yeah.
And I just think, man, if I could just get my brain
yes.
to transport into, whatever nerve endings are necessary.
Yes, and the frustration.
Because in my head, I can hear it.
Yes, yeah.
In my head, it's amazing,
right.
but it's not what comes out.
Exactly.
And maybe it's just a timing, it's a lack of ability, it's I need to put more work in.
Yeah.
It's just I didn't get the inspiration, whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
But do you feel that ever as an artist?
Oh my
of
gosh.
like, I know what I'm wanting to communicate, but it's just not...
Yes. Well, and this show is called About to Break, right? Like, part of the breaking point is when it's not just, the other things we're talking about wanting the job, wanting the money. It's the struggle and the frustration of wanting to do something well that you don't seem to have the ability yet to do well. Yeah. At least not well the way you see it in your head or the way,
Yeah, and you struggle because you think, how many other people are trying to do this?
Yeah.
How many whether it's acting or art or comedy, how many people are moonlighting as stand-up comedians?
Yeah.
And how many of them are actually going to make a career where that's what they can focus on full time?
Yeah. Oh, and it's daunting
when you
scary. Think about the statistics and the percentages. It's
and you want to, there's part of you that wants to make the wise decision and wants to go, okay, am I one of the guys that just it's going to be a hobby?
Yeah. Right.
And how old can I get?
Yeah.
Before I need to go, okay,
it's time to hang it up.
It's just a hobby.
Yeah.
What age is it embarrassing to my extended family?
Right.
Right. What age do I have to be awkward at Thanksgiving going, I do magic shows? So you're at a point now. You're still married. Thank God for that.
Yeah. Right.
She's stuck.
She's stuck with you through. Well, and that's what one of the things I was going to say is the struggle. I can't tell you how many times. It's embarrassing to say this over a podcast. How many times I've wept and bawled out of the frustration of feeling not good enough at this, and feeling like I should I just give it up?
Yeah.
Like, should I just... Why am I doing this? Like, this isn't... If I were 20, not married, didn't have 4 children...
Right.
This would be a little easier, right? Because then it's just me. My decisions only affect me.
And this is one of the reasons why, like, Micah, you got to be... You got to do this with me and probably do it on the regular because...
Right.
You're coming from a perspective that I've struggled with, and I think a lot of younger guys don't understand, of, like... The risk becomes greater when, at the end of the day, there's more mouths to feed.
Yes.
At the end of the day, you're not just letting yourself down. There's a pressure that I can only equate to. I'm not a gambler, but...
Mm-hmm.
And how many times can I go all in?
Right.
Before I just lose it?
Yeah.
It's almost like, all right, I could take this job that's been offered to me. Mm-hmm. There'd be steady work. Or I can stick with this thing I'm working on that could eventually make it so I don't have to worry about this or that.
Right. Yeah.
But in the meantime, I'm going to worry every day.
Right. Yeah. The pressure is unbelievable. And it's not also just that, but it's also that when you have a family and kids, aside from the risk, is the time factor, right? Because you still have to feed yourself, your wife, your kids.
Right.
You can't just, eat ramen noodles and
or sleep
else.
on someone's couch.
Right. Or only get 3 hours of sleep. You've got responsibilities, so you have to go to work. You have to do something, and so, you've got to squeeze all of that work, that effort, the struggle into the few hours that you have after the kids go to bed.
Yeah.
or whatever that may be in your particular situation. But yeah.
You're not putting enough time into your work, but then at the same time feeling like I was not a good dad today.
Yeah.
Or I did not love my wife like I should have today.
Yeah.
Or I was home, but I wasn't really there.
Yeah.
I mean, I was at the dinner table, but I wasn't present. My mind was on all these other things.
Yeah. I don't do it as much now as I did maybe a few years ago when I was still kind of learning how this works when you have kids. But there are times when, I'll try to take a moment, maybe a half hour, an hour, while I'm watching the kids. I'll have them play something and I'll try to go do something creative. And inevitably I still get interrupted every 10 minutes and my creative concentration gets broken and it's hard to start up. But then after all that, there is that guilt of like at the end of the day I go, oh, shoot, I really did not get much done in that hour.
Right.
And also they missed out because I wasn't spending that time with them,
Oh yeah. Or you do that thing where, and I mean, we are so blessed, the both of us.
Oh yeah.
Have such amazing wives who love us despite all of our weird quirkiness and our emotional artist nature.
Right.
But there's those times when you say, honey, I just need to take 2 hours. I'm going to go get a cup of coffee and I'm going to work on this.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, do it. You got to do it.
Yes. Yeah.
And that feeling when you're driving back home and go, I didn't get it done. I've got nothing to show for it. I went through 3 drafts of this thing I was writing, and they're all crap. They are worthless.
Yeah.
And so now it's like I gave up this time with the family to do this thing, and I didn't even do it.
Yeah.
And not for lack of trying.
Right. And I don't know if you're like me, but that pressure of going, I've got this small window of time to make something happen, and then that pressure eats you up, and then you don't get anything done, right? Right? Yeah. When if you had just been like, it's fine, maybe you because you weren't so stressed out about it, you would have gotten something more done. But it's not easy to navigate.
If you're listening, thank you for tuning in to How to Be an Okay Dad and a Terrible Artist. I feel like it got a little heavy there. We're both just like...
Right.
But these are our conversations on the regular. This is... And I think this is why, our conversations one-on-one are hugely important to me personally, but also why conversations like we have on this podcast are important, because we work in industries where everybody puts up the front.
Yeah.
There's the idea of like, you just got to play the game.
Yeah.
Before you book that gig, you got to drive the car you can't afford.
Right.
I can't tell you how many people I've met who drive a car that the payment on it was more than my first apartment.
Yeah.
And they're not booking work, but they got to look like they are.
Sure.
So I think it's huge that we can be like, okay, let's be serious about our art. Let's do everything we can to make something good for people and to make people's life better through our creativity. But let's also be real that this is hard.
Yeah.
This is not... It's not easy. Like, the mental side of this thing and the emotional side of it is challenging.
And I think that's why, this goes back to what I said about talent. It's not really about talent. For those few people who somehow were born just good at something, like without having to work at it, which is extremely few. The rest of us, it's a long game, right? It's the statistics, the people that make it, those are the people that are going to stick through all of the struggle.
Oh yeah,
as long as it takes until it finally breaks. Right?
Yep. Yeah.
Seinfeld
talks about that. He's like, you want to know who's in show business? The people who want to be in it more than anything else.
Yeah.
And he's like, people say you're so lucky to have this job, and he's like, no, you're not. Yeah. At one point, you quit the day job.
Right.
At one point, everyone else was out doing this, and you were at home writing.
Yeah.
It's just weird when you're in that moment where you're doing all those things and going, okay, it's okay. We're gonna make the bills. They're gonna go away this month.
Right. Yeah, it's the and that is one of the biggest struggles all along is, all right, when is enough? How long do I stick in this game? How long do I keep burning the candle at both ends? Giving the time to my family that they need, and then doing this on my lunches, and then after my wife goes to sleep, and staying up late at night, and not getting as much sleep as I need because I need to do this.
Yeah. But then there's those moments.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden it's like, wow.
This is why I do it.
Something happened.
Yeah. Yeah. There's little victories and
yeah. I mean, sure, there's plenty of times. I can tell you how many times I've gone to do a gig and traveled to the East Coast and spent 3 days on the road to perform for 30 minutes and got up there and felt like I didn't connect at all. No, not, It wasn't that I wasn't working hard, but they just didn't like it. It wasn't their thing,
Mm-hmm.
But then there's those moments where you feel like you really connected with people and you feel like you shared something that really made a difference. And you go, okay, that'll get me through 2 more months of late nights.
Yeah.
That right there, I'll think about that moment, or I'll think about that illustration that I made, or I'll think about the shading or the shape of that, or how the light came across in this piece that you do.
Yeah.
And you go, all right.
That'll carry me.
Through.
Yeah.
What is one of the things right now that you're just like, I really like the potential of this or this idea? Or
Sure. Well, I just got a Winsor Newton 7 brush and Sumi ink. And which may not mean anything to anybody out there.
A Winsor Newton
7
brush.
Sable brush and Sumi ink.
Right now there's an illustrator listening to this and going, oh.
With the
there's one guy in Cleveland whose toes just curled. Just that one guy. That one.
For that guy in Cleveland, I get it, bro.
He had to pull the car over. He's on the side of the road right now. Sir, be safe. Did he say a number 7? Windsor? Okay, so what is you're very excited about it.
So yeah, so it's I want to start doing some ink wash stuff, which kind of goes into learning how to simplify light and dark into just stages of black to gray shading using ink, the Sumi ink. And the reason for the Sumi ink is because it's water soluble, which is a little bit more like watercolor. Whereas if you get like India ink, it doesn't mix with the water well. Yeah.
See, this is why. Okay, this is why whenever you're like, I don't know, man, I'm not feeling it. This is why I'm like, you got to do this, Micah.
Yeah.
You get excited about the space between black and gray.
Yeah, right.
And you see it. You know what I mean? Yeah, and that's a gift. It's something that literally, that's the thing that when you look at, those are the kind of things that when you look at this picture versus this one, and this one makes you weep, and this one you're just like, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And you don't realize that you found some shade that's 43 degrees in between black and gray.
Right.
That is the crying shade. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain why I love this stuff so much. I don't know if maybe most artists of all different kinds don't know why they like it. I just do. It's exciting to me.
I love it. I guarantee that you and I are gonna do some more of these because I just love conversation with you, man.
Oh yeah.
And I really think your love for art is incredible, but I also think just where you're at in life and what you're learning through this process. I mean, that's one of the things that gets me most excited. I think it can help people. So if there's someone listening, I haven't done this yet on any of these recordings, but if there's somebody, like, what would you say to somebody who is like, I'm ready to wrap up my career and do something else?
Sure. Yeah. So, where I'm at right now, I can say this. give yourself the space to do it, but don't put the pressure on yourself to have to make it right now. You know, because I think that's one of the big things is like you feel like I've got to make it this week because I have to make money, and if I'm not successful at this now, then I don't know how much longer I can go. Look, you know, I think it's foolish to start out thinking you're going to get a job. You know, if you just started this thinking you're going to get a job doing it in the first year or something. Some people do, right? You know, but the long game is to learn to be okay with where you're at and say, I'm okay doing this for myself, for my growth, because I enjoy it, and in the time that I have, and get a regular job and feed yourself, feed your family, if you've got a family to feed.
And there's no shame in having another job.
No.
Like, you take the pressure off of going, oh.
Yes, yeah.
If that gives you the relief you need to be creative.
Right.
You know, if you got to go work a 9 to 5 so that at 6 you can be yourself and not be worried about how I'm going to pay the bills.
Yes.
Do it.
And that is the strategic thing to do, right? Because that is still giving your passions, that is giving the thing that gets you going in the morning. That's making a space for it and still taking care of your responsibilities. And so I'm saying don't give up. Just find a way to make space for that in your life, and eventually more and more space will open up until hopefully that's the thing that you're doing all the time. Right?
That's rad, man. I like that.
Well, I really enjoyed this. I think there's a lot more to be said, so I look forward to it.
This will be, I guarantee this is part 1 of like 400 podcasts that you'll hear with Micah. When I first got my podcast equipment, Micah, I called him and I said, Micah, come over. And he came over and we set it all up, and we just had so much fun hearing our own voices in our head with the headphones. So I saved those recordings, and I think to end the podcast with Micah Hanson, I'm gonna throw some of those recordings on here.
Nice.
If I have your permission, is that okay, Micah?
Sure.
Okay, so
I'm gonna be mortified, but sure, yes, go ahead.
So if you want to see more about Micah, go to MicahHanson.com. That's MICAH Hanson.com. You can check out his artwork. You can hire him to do some strategic work for your brand or for what you're working on.
Yeah.
Until then, enjoy Micah testing microphones. All right, this is a commercial for the new Star Wars. Take 1.
This summer, it's a movie you've never seen before. Except that you've probably seen it 400 times before. There's spaceships. There's weird-looking animals. There's aliens. Directed by a young man named... Well, let's just say he's not the other guy.
Ka-chow!
With a young man who looks like Luke Skywalker, but's not Luke Skywalker.
He's just a guy with no hands.
And a young lady, since we've never really had lead ladies in the past.
Okay, now we're gonna get this.
I don't know what I'm saying.
Get to the serious part. Serious part.
Also, 2 new robots. Droids. Trying to find their way home. To Luke Skywalker.
Luke Skywalker? He's not over here. Let's look somewhere else.
With better special effects than you've seen in the last 2 years.
Wow.
And plenty of titles that run on and on forever down the screen.
I missed the cue.
Hi, this is Micah Hanson. I'm here at the casket outlet where caskets are raining down from heaven. There's caskets everywhere. It's quite a sight, John.
Oh my God, my eyeballs are falling out on account of these caskets that have stabbed my eye holes. Oh, no. You know the pole thing where they hold the guy? It's in my eyeball.
Oh, dear, that's unfortunate.
Why aren't you getting more excited? You're just so calm about it. Oh, God, it's happened again.
My recommendation would be to see a medical professional for that.
I can't see anything. It's in my eye.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I know how to help you.
You're not even human. The way you're acting is so calm and unfazed by the fact that my eyes are falling out.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, this gentleman here has a pole sticking out of his eye. Is there something that can be done about that?
Yes. Yes, I believe we have a first aid kit. Let me go check.
Do you have a pole remover?
Let me go see. It's not really my department.
Why can't he do something?